know that there is any one happy moment. I've had a lot of very happy moments when clients have been satisfied with what I've done for them, and say so. That doesn't happen a lot. Lawyers are the folks that people need when they're in the worst possible situations they can be in. They're charged with a crime, they're getting a divorce, they're going through bankruptcy, they've been injured and need to sue somebody because they've got to recover some money, or they're on the other side of that. They're in a business deal that's gone south and they need some help. So we're the people that have to come in and be the janitors to clean up problems for the most part. So many of the happy moments that I've experienced is when I've been able to help people who are in extremis and be able to accomplish some good for them. A couple of those were through the legal aid program, volunteer lawyer program, helping people who have no idea about the legal system. All they know is that they've got a problem that is insurmountable to them. And it's only because they're unfamiliar and unsophisticated about legal matters that it's so difficult for them. And they are so relieved and so pleased that there's a very simple solution to ease their pain. And that's fun to do, something like that, because you really give people peace of mind. And those are happy moments. When you're judging, it's hard to have happy moments because by definition somebody has to lose. When the case comes to us on the Court of Appeals, somebody has already lost. And so we're not there to make somebody happy by changing that result. What we're there to do is to do the right thing. So happy moments in judging are figuring out a difficult problem and coming to an answer which you're satisfied with and which you think is legally correct and which you are willing to publish for posterity and put your name on it and say, by golly, this is something that I've done and I think it's right, and take your best shot at it, kind of thing. So those are the feel-good times for me as a judge, to try and work through difficult problems and come to a solution that makes some sense.
That's very cool. All right, watching and talking, and how to learn from that. That was one of the things you said. Learning how to do things from watching and talking to others.
As a young lawyer, I spent a lot of time in court waiting for my matters to be heard. So I got to watch other lawyers and see how they did things. I got to do that when I was a law clerk, and when I was bailiffing oral arguments, I got to see oral advocacy. My clerks get to do that, and they also get to read briefs and look at trial records and things like that. And it's a real good learning experience. And when I was growing up as a lawyer, it was pretty easy to pick up the phone and call somebody who knew something about an area of the law and say, hey, I've got this problem. Have you ever had this before? And if so, tell me what you think. It was a very small legal community. It's still pretty small here in Tucson. But then it was even much smaller, and the lawyers all knew one another. And you could call somebody up and ask them a question, and they'd give you an answer. The benefit of their advice, of their experience, was oftentimes invaluable and very helpful. And for people who are in, especially solo practitioners or in small firms, that kind of thing is really important. When you're in larger firms, you have the experience of the many lawyers in that firm to draw from. But when I was growing up as a lawyer, we didn't have very many people. We had a couple of pretty darn experienced people. My senior partner, Ivo DiConcini, had been Attorney General of the state. He'd been a Supreme Court justice. He was a very savvy businessman, so I mean, he had a lot of information that he was very willing to share with me, and I was very appreciative of that. He was a good teacher and a good man to practice law with. So watching and learning is important. It's amazing how much you can learn when you keep your mouth shut. It's very hard to learn things when you're talking, but when you're listening and watching, you can actually learn things. And I found over the years that keeping my mouth shut was probably the smartest thing I did on many occasions. I can't remember what the adage is about being quiet and only appearing stupid, but when you open your mouth and say something, you remove all doubt. And so I tried not to do that.
And the very last thing is, I don't know if you want to, I don't know if we're running out of time, but if you, you had also put down several experiences dealing with clients, other lawyers, and the courts. I don't know if there's some specific things that you wanted to talk about or not.
Well, one of the generic things I had in mind in dealing with other lawyers was what I just expressed, was the sense of community and camaraderie among lawyers in helping one another. I would like to think that that still exists to a significant degree. I think it's important that it does. One of the tenets of professionalism, I think, is to make sure that if another lawyer needs some help, you give it to them. And that's good for the system, it's good for the clients, it's good for you, and it's certainly good for the person who needs the help. I'll never forget my partner John McDonald was making an argument on a motion one day, and I happened to be in the courtroom waiting for my own motion to come up. He was arguing a case against another lawyer of quite a bit of experience by the name of Ed Morgan, who Ed's still practicing here in town. And John made a very intemperate remark to one of our Superior Court judges, which resulted in him being held in contempt and fined $50 on the spot. And since John knew I was in the courtroom, he asked me to go back to the office and get a check to keep him out of the pokey. And the judge says, well, if you don't have the money now, you're Mr. Sheriff, you come take Mr. McDonald away till he comes up with the money. And Ed Morgan literally dove into his client, who was a woman, her pocketbook, and fished out the $50 and gave it to the clerk. And I'll talk about lawyers helping lawyers. That's a perfect example of it. I mean, John never should have said what he said, but he did, and he got himself in trouble, and he got some help from a fellow lawyer. So that was an interesting experience, and it kind of made me understand that maybe that's how I ought to act if somebody opposing me gets into trouble. Nobody ever did, so I never had to do that, but it was a good object lesson, I thought. And I later had cases against Ed, and he was always a gentleman to deal with. Still is.
So do you think that community and camaraderie and kindness are important to law? I mean,
Yes.
are they critical?
I do. Lawyers can be adversaries, but they don't have to be enemies. And just because you joust and fight over points and try and prove your client's point doesn't mean that you have to vilify not only the other client, but the lawyer that represents your client's opponent. It's not necessary. You're going to see these people again, and you might even be on the same side of a matter with these people someday. There's no reason to make it personal. Some lawyers do make it personal, and it's very unfortunate. But there's no need to do it. And I think it's important for lawyers to be collegial. That doesn't mean that they have to give away the store when representing their clients, but being courteous and collegial and friendly and nice doesn't hurt a bit, and it helps a lot, because practicing law is not an easy thing to do in its best moments, and in its worst moments, those little niceties can often make the difference between having a terrible day and just having a bad day.
Well, do you have any other thoughts before we sign off today?
Be happy to answer your questions. I've got lots of thoughts, but I don't know what that they'd be of all that much use without being responsive to something directly. So.
Do you have any questions, any thoughts?
I don't.
No? Okay. Well, I think I will release you from that.
Okay.
But it's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
This is